For those that don't know me, I'm Dr. Arianna. I'm a naturopathic doctor here at Anderson Family Chiropractic and Naturopathic Care. I work with my husband, Dr. G. Anderson, who's a chiropractor, and together we provide natural healthcare solutions to help support your body's natural ability to heal and restore function. So tonight we are going to talk about digestion, which is my most favorite topic ever. Peggy can probably attest to. Right, so most common cause of most chronic illness really comes down to poor eating habits, poor food choices, and then a lot of our reliance on over-the-counter drugs and pharmaceuticals for relief. Although sometimes it's just, we need something to help our body get along. If we become dependent on that, oftentimes our bodies are not being strong, and our immune systems take the brunt of that. There you go. And then, common cause of chronic illness, inflammatory bowel disorders such as IBS, colitis, Crohn's, autoimmune, Crohn's would be under autoimmune conditions such as arthritis, Crohn's, psoriasis, and lupus. Fatigue, which would just be also general malaise. Failure to thrive, which is sometimes called the walking wounded syndrome, just can't feel energy. Autotoxicity, which is increased buildup of toxins from within. Cells do actually create waste, and if your body can't get rid of it efficiently, it actually does cause toxicity on the inside. Endocrine imbalances such as PMS, infertility, estrogen dominance. These are very broad categories with literally hundreds of diseases whose etiology can be traced back to digestive problems. So if you figure, how do we get replacement parts for our body to make new tissues and cells? Food. Yeah. That's the only way. It's either going to be from food or, in our case, you use whole food supplements, but ultimately the building blocks are going to be vitamins and minerals, and your body utilizes enzymes through those processes too, and they are broken down in the stomach. That's where they first kind of start, so we're going to talk about that. So first we'll talk about poor eating habits, eating under stress. Digestion is mainly what's called a parasympathetic function. So we have our autonomic nervous system, which is the nervous system that does all the things in your body that you're not consciously aware of. And it's split into two. You've got your sympathetic nervous system and your parasympathetic. Your sympathetic is kind of like your gas pedal. It's your go, 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 get stuff done. And your parasympathetic is like your brake. Rest, digest, detox, digest. That's a big one. And so if we are always in sympathetic go, go, go mode, we are not going to have proper digestion. A lot of times people, especially in our culture, we eat on the run. We'll eat while we're, in our cars, as fast as we can. Even at home sometimes we're going to eat. We're just like eating quickly, thinking about the next thing we're going to do. Our mind, and our emotions are not actually focusing on what we're doing, which is digestion. And there's actually hormones that are secreted when you're kind of thinking and smelling and having kind of an emotional reaction regarding to food. So if we're not actually engaging and being present in eating, that can be a hindrance to actual digestion as well. Improper chewing, which is sometimes called mastication of food. That's actually where digestion first starts, is in the mouth. You have glands in your cheeks that secretes enzymes for digestion, also detoxification, but it's actually where you first start to break down carbohydrates. Carbohydrates actually take a really long time to break down in the system. So your body is designed to start that process in the mouth. And so if we don't chew our food well, we don't get those enzymes to start that process early. So food is not properly broken down enough for hydrochloric acid and digestive enzymes to properly digest food in the stomach. It doesn't have any times to mix with the saliva. And each mouthful should actually, ideally, be chewed 32 times. I will tell you, though, that I am not good at that. I have to really be intentional about it. I think our family, just the way we grew up, we kind of like, don't swallow. So I have to, focus on that, too. I don't know if I can do 32 times. It's a lot because it kind of makes it liquid. Yeah. So, but ideally, that's how it should be. It also helps with weight management. So, again, for poor food choices, empty calorie processed carbohydrates, which a lot of times people are eating on the go, right? Fast food, there's a lot of that in there. Has little to no fiber content. No support for friendly gastrointestinal flora. What's interesting, there are certain species of flora in your microbiome, in your gut, that actually need fiber. That's their food. And those are super essential for you to be able to digest your food properly down into the actual small intestine. And so what happens is if you don't bring enough fiber for your, I call them your little buddies, what's going to happen is they kind of starving. They're going to have to eat something. What they end up eating is actually a mucosal layer. That is not good. You want to have a nice mucosal layer along your intestinal tract. Otherwise, there's actually just kind of bare skin there, and that opens you up to possible infection. So when you eat, think about the fact that you've got to feed your little buddies, and they like fiber. Slow, insidious breakdown of GI ecology, which we'll talk about a little bit later in more detail. Allergenic food sets the stage for chronic gastric problems. So there's a lot of people that have issues with foods, digestion of foods. Common allergies are wheat and gluten. And I'll tell you, we have a whole lecture on food allergies that we go do a much deeper dive into that. And I'll tell you, this is the thing. It's not like wheat is evil. It's really not. The problem is that over the decades, it has been commercially hybridized to have more gluten in it. For a variety of reasons. It has more to do with the ability, like the peel of it from sort of soft and squishy and pliable. It also sometimes can have a longer shelf life, things like that. But it's not evil in and of itself. It's just hard for our stomachs to break down. And so if you already have gastrointestinal distress or challenge, you're going to have a hard time with that because it's just the way it is. It's just hard to break down. So if somebody has a challenge there, that's one of the first ones that happens to come up because it just is a difficult one to break down. Another one is dairy. That also is hard to break down. Eggs are in there too, although they're not the same, obviously. Dairy comes from cow's milk or whatever milk you're getting it from. But eggs do occur, but dairy is probably more common than eggs. Less common allergies, peanuts, soy, and then we can see over there. There's other nuts too. Sometimes almonds will come up. My son actually had a almond allergy for a little while. Processed meats. A lot of times we don't necessarily think about this, but they're generally high in fat and preservatives, nitrates. We know that they're bad for us, but they put the nitrates in because they don't want to run the risk of botulism when you're working with meat that's being prepped in like commercial, areas where you could get bacteria. So nitrates are definitely not good for you, though. So it's almost like kind of a better of two evils. So it definitely is better to stay away from those that are not good for you. Lack of key vitamins, minerals, and cofactors leads to insidious degradation of GI tract and health. So these are some of the things that are devoid in a lot of the processed foods that we eat. Now, they will say it's been fortified with things, but keep in mind that's not the same thing as the nutrients that were in the original food, the original whole food. Most of the time what they're adding in is something that has been formulated in a lab, not from a plant, which is something to keep in mind. So like if you say you have some type of a mineral, it naturally occurs in rock, right? We don't normally eat rocks, right? Mm-hmm. So if we take that mineral in the form that it is in a rock, our body is not going to be able to utilize it as it would if we get that mineral that comes in through a plant. A plant naturally brings those minerals in through its roots, and it goes through a process called chelation. It binds it with other, what are called cofactors, other different substances that make it perfectly packaged for our bodies to be able to digest and absorb into our bloodstream to be able to utilize. So they're definitely not the same, but these are a lot of the vitamins that come out through processing, which are vitamin A, C, B6, folic acid, B12, magnesium, zinc, calcium, phytonutrients, and a lot of antioxidants. And acids and health risks. Side effects of medications can cause increased toxicity and diminished liver function. So there is one here, I think it's called cimetidine. can't remember, I think that's how it's pronounced, but it actually, they do know that it slows phase 2 liver detoxification, and that inhibits the body's ability to remove toxins. So that's a big problem. But even just the normal PPIs that you can, those are proton pump inhibitors. You can get those like Nexiums, you can get those over the counter. Those are known to put strain on the liver and also cause you not to be able to digest and absorb calcium properly. So they know that bone loss is a long-term symptom of taking those over a period of time. As a matter of fact, there is a testimony on the wall over there by Michelle, and she talked about her experience being on Nexium, particularly over 10 years. And that's exactly what happened. She started to have significant liver challenges and also bone loss. But she has completely turned her road around and has done it completely naturally. So it can happen. Your body does have the ability to restore function. Sometimes these things can kind of get away from it. Poor digestion and absorption, which we kind of talked about. Increased pathogenic bacteria, parasites, and yeast. And we'll talk about that. Actually, one of the biggest lines of defense, or your first lines of defense with pathogens, especially if they're coming in through what we're drinking or what we're eating, is hydrochloric acid in the stomach. Your stomach is actually supposed to be acid. It's supposed to be very acid, anywhere between 1.5 and 3. Ideally, it would be 1.5. And so when those pathogenic microbes come in through food and drink, if your stomach acid is adequate, it kills them. But the problem is that most people are taking antacids, which makes your stomach very alkaline. And so you're missing the first line of defense almost entirely. So that's a problem. It does cause some degradation of the GI tract lining, chronic illnesses, and sometimes patients don't know that some of the antacids that they're taking is actually leading to health degradation. For instance, Michelle, she didn't know any of this. She never read the symptoms and side effects until she actually started to have them. And then it was a real problem. She was in the hospital for almost 4 days. So it was after that she went and she read the symptoms and side effects, and it was exactly what was happening to her. So I think that's part of it too. People just don't know. So interestingly, hydrochloric acid production in most people actually goes down with age. So why do so many of us experience heartburn? Well, acid reflux and the feeling that there's too much acid. Some thoughts, and I'm actually going to go into it in detail, but acid reflux, there is a sphincter in between your stomach and your esophagus called the cardiac sphincter. They call it that because it's by the heart. And it's supposed to stay closed, but over time that can actually lose tone. And the issue is that your stomach contents, even if it's not quite down, let's say it's like a pH of 5, that still feels acid. It's not acid enough, but it still feels acid. So that coming up through that cardiac sphincter is going to feel like acid. So that is a big problem. That's a big part of the problem. And it loses proper tone. Some upper bowel dysbiosis. So sometimes things are not working right in the upper part of your small intestine from a microbiome. We're talking about our little buddies. Things that are, they actually do help with digestion. Sometimes that is out of whack, so that can be part of it. And then one of the symptoms of that is that when people have a lot of gas and burping 15 to 30 minutes after a meal, that would be a good signal to that. What we're going to do right now, though, I'm going to actually go through how digestion should work normally, and then what's happening when someone has heartburn. Okay? It's just going to give you a little digestion 101 on how this actually works. Can you see okay, Pat? Uh-huh. Okay. So you got somebody, let's just say this is their esophagus. Okay? This is where the tube where it comes down. And then we've got your stomach right here. And then you're going to have what's called the duodenum. That's just the first part of your small intestine. Now, in here you have what's called the cardiac sphincter right here. And then you're going to have the pyloric sphincter here. So they're just the sphincters to keep things separated, right? And so somebody eats something, right? We're going to use blue for normal digestion. Somebody eats something, and let's think of like a big log. Think of a big log. So you chew it up, and now we've got wood. We just got pieces of wood, all right? So we've got pieces of wood kind of coming down through the esophagus into the stomach, all right? Now in the stomach, you've got what are called parietal cells. You don't have to remember that. I won't test you. But there's these little cells at the bottom that produce hydrochloric acid, and then something that's called pepsinogen. The two of them will bind and actually create an enzyme that breaks down protein. Now, what's interesting is that enzyme is most active at a pH of 1.5, and anywhere between 1.5 and 3, but it's most active at 1.5. So these parietal cells are supposed to be made, they put out hydrochloric acid, so that's a pH of 1. As it mixes with your stomach contents, it's going to go up a little bit. But, so the food comes down in here and starts churning, right? And so you have the hydrochloric acid being produced and the pepsinogen making the enzymes that are going to break that down from like pieces of wood down to, maybe like just small. It's getting smaller. We're starting to get smaller pieces. And then once it gets down to the whole food bolus, down to about a pH of 1.5 to 2, what happens is that actually will signal hormones to be secreted that will open up your pyloric sphincter. And then this is going to come in to the duodenum. What's interesting, so this is typically, should be about 1.5. The duodenum is a pH of 4, which although that doesn't seem like a lot, it is. It's actually a big difference from a pH perspective. So when this really acid food ball goes into here, it's like fire in the hole. And so what happens is that triggers the liver, which is over here, to secrete bile, and the pancreas, which is down here, to secrete what's called bicarbonate. The bicarbonate actually alkalizes that food bolus. It's super important because it's super acid and it needs to not be acid in there. So the bicarbonate makes that, it's going to bring that pH up. And then that stimulates enzymes, and then bile emulsifies fat. So you need that for your fat digestion. And the pancreas is going to secrete enzymes. You need that because that's what's going to further break down those pieces of wood into little tiny, like toothpicks and splinters, right? Mm-hmm. That's how from here down to here, like the big log, that's how we get those things to be broken down. And then it goes on its merry way to get broken down further and absorbed into the bloodstream. Now, when it's not working properly, so we eat it and it goes down. And then we have, kind of bigger food particles that get down here. But let's say, we're having some issues. It's not making enough hydrochloric acid. So it's like a pH of even like 4 or 5. Okay, still acid. If it came up your esophagus, it would still feel burning, but it's not low enough for this to get signaled to open up. And so it just sits in there, and it just turns around and it turns around. It's waiting for that pH to get low enough. Well, it sits in there 2, 3, 4 hours, and guess what's going to happen? You're going to get hungry. You're still hungry because it didn't get in here. You got to eat. So you go and eat something, and now we have more food that comes down and it gets in here, but it's still not getting down to pH 1.5. That's the ideal number to open that up. And then it sits in there, and now we actually have organic acids starting to break down because it's starting to decay, right? But that's what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to break down. Unfortunately, it's not supposed to do that in the stomach, right? And so now we have some organic acids that are being created because this food is being broken down in an area it's not supposed to, and that also starts coming up. And now we have a whole bunch in there that's coming up and pushing on that cardiac sphincter. And over time, that decreases the tone, which makes this kind of floppy, and now we have stuff coming up. And that's when we start to feel the acid. But the issue is still, it's not actually acid enough. So we continue, but then say we eat again, and now your stomach's like, well, I gotta move stuff along. So it pushes this through. Let's say it's a pH of 4.5, and we go into a pH of 4. We don't have fire in the hole. So the bicarbonate isn't being secreted as it should, which not only does it help to buffer the acidic, what should be acidic, it also is used in the blood to buffer your blood salts. So that's not coming out. And then, of course, if that's not coming out, then the enzymes and the bile aren't being secreted as they should. So now we have two things that are needed for fat digestion and enzyme digestion that are not being secreted or aren't being secreted in the quantities they should be. And so then you have food that's coming through that are in bigger particles, right? They're not the splinters and the toothpicks. And so those are not going to be able to be digested properly, and they're going to continue to kind of decay as they go through the intestinal tract. And this is what ends up causing toxicity of the bowel. So if you ever go out and you read the China study, the issue with that I have with that particular study is that they don't qualify the kind of meat or the digestive health of the people that were in it. Because for sure, if you have poor digestion, this isn't 1.5, if this isn't happening properly, you're going to have poorly digested proteins in your intestinal tract for however long it takes for you to evacuate. And that is just going to cause toxicity of the lower bowel. So, are antacids good? What's going to happen if you take an antacid?
Make that worse.
Oh, it's going to make it way worse. Because it'll take it up to anywhere between 8 to 12 pH.
Wow.
Right? So, it'll take your symptom away, but this still isn't happening. It's going to lead to long-term lower bowel problems in the end. So, any questions about that? Your digestion 101? All right, so that's how our digestion should work. All right, persistent problems. So, patients with lower bowel gas, bloating, and constipation or cramping, that happens a lot. Very often, this is due to intestinal dysbiosis, imbalance of the GI ecology, which has a lot to do with this improper digestion. From this upstream digestion issue is affecting what's going on down here. And the fact that we don't even have fiber, right? We're not feeding our buddies. And the ecology, that biome of the intestinal tract is a wonderful, complex system kept in balance through proper eating, digestion, proper liver biliary function, because we need to have proper bile for fat digestion, immune system function, friendly flora, food specifically used by flora, like we talked about, those vegetables, that fiber, they need them because that's what they eat. So now we're going to look actually at liver, gallbladder health and how that affects our digestive process. So the liver's over here. Liver is what makes bile and does a million things. It's our key organ for detoxification. But for this presentation, it really has more to do with its bile production, that stuff that emulsifies fats. And then we have a gallbladder, which is like a repository for the bile. So it kind of holds onto that bile, and then it secretes it after the fire in the hole, right? Mm-hmm. And so it secretes it into what should be what's called chyme at that point, and that helps with digestion. Also, it's interesting, just anecdotal, I guess, just to think about. So if this isn't happening properly with the fire in the hole, what might happen with the gallbladder if it's not secreting these things regularly, right? I mean, think about how many people have issues with their gallbladders. There's a lot going on with that, but that's just something to maybe consider. So liver produces bile. Bile performs several functions. One, breaking down, repackaging, and absorption of dietary fats in the gut so that we can actually get them into the bloodstream. They're very important. It helps to neutralize stomach acid in the duodenum, which is part of your small intestine. Carries high molecular weight toxins from the liver to the GI tract for excretion in the feces. Super important. So keep that in mind too. Your liver can actually get rid of fat-soluble toxins through bile. We don't want that hanging out in the gallbladder. We want that to get the heck out of there. That needs to get out, and so you can get it moving on. Bile should flow freely from the gallbladder with a meal, especially containing fat. If the bile quality is low, or if it's released from the gallbladder is sluggish, it can manifest in constipation, poor fat absorption, poor release of toxins, GI symptoms, and degraded health. So how would you know if you have an issue there? Oftentimes, when you eat fats, you're going to have a lot of discomfort, usually in this area right here. People that have it significantly, I mean, sometimes it'll actually cripple them because the gallbladder is contracting, but it's not being able to secrete how it should, and so it's causing spasming, and it can be very uncomfortable. light colored stools. So when bile is being secreted properly, your stools should be brown. They really should actually be a dark brown color. So if you see stools that, and I have seen stools even with little children that were very light, almost beige, that is indicative that there's something going on with their gallbladder and that needs to get considered. And by the way, you can cleanse your gallbladders. You do not have to have them removed. I can tell you if you go to any ER or MD, they're going to tell you that's not possible, but I can tell you for sure you can. And there's also ways you can do this naturally over time. It's not going to be as immediate, but you can do this over time with certain food sources and nutrients. Oily stools, that means that those fats did not get broken down properly in the digestive system. Constipation is your number one signal that there's something going on with the gallbladder. All right, so IBS, colitis, and bowel inflammation. The first stop with this is really to figure out the cause, and there can be many. Sometimes it has to do with dysbiosis. That just means the gut flora is out of whack. They have actually something called the Human Microbiome Project. I don't know if any of you've heard of it. I'm sure Peggy probably told you, but it's a big, huge project. It's, remember when they did like the Human Genome Project? It's like that. I mean, where they're putting a big think tank. And they found, I believe last time I checked, that they have found that there are in between 3,000 to 4,000 different species of microbes that are naturally occurring and necessary for human health on and in the body. So what's also interesting is they have found people that have very good health have a certain percentage of different species of microbes in their gut, and people that have very poor health tend to have certain things flip-flopped. So our microbiome is very important. This can be, this is a big thing. A lot of times you can use probiotics with this, but a big part of this is going to be food. It's going to be, if you're not feeding your little buddies the right things, you're not going to have those little buddies. They're going to die off. So this sometimes takes a little while, but it absolutely can help. And I can tell you recently, I was listening to a doctor who was talking about some of the more recent forecasting of, like, with antibiotics, how long it actually takes for your gut to repopulate as it was before you took them. And so they're thinking it's more like a year. And it's interesting. I did actually have someone I was working with who had taken an antibiotic, a really strong one. She did test for, and we'll talk about how we do testing later, but she tested for a probiotic, a pretty strong one, to help with her gut. And it was almost a year that she tested for that before she tested off of it, which I thought was kind of interesting since I hadn't heard that doctor talking about that. So sometimes antibiotics can be life-saving, right? Mm-hmm. Right? So if you're in a situation where it's life or death, help me out, right? Mm-hmm. But if it's not life or death, you have to think about that, right? My first strategy be to improve my overall health, boost my immune system so that my body can get over this on its own? Or should I use an antibiotic, which I know is going to blast my gut, and it's going to take about a year to get it back into where it used to be? So you make those choices. Overgrowth, parasites, or fungus. So this ends up happening because of the microbiome being off. And with an antibiotic as well, it will not kill any fungus or yeast. It only kills the bacteria. And those of you that may know that fungus and yeast are very hardy microbes. They're kind of like the mob bosses of the microbe world. And so if they have an opportunity, and that definitely happens after antibiotic treatments, they will proliferate. And so it's not that they're not supposed to be there. They're just not supposed to be there like mob bosses, right? And so if they do get to be like that, they can really cause a lot of issues in the gut in relation to inflammation. So, but again, this can also be